It's not inevitable that these natural disasters turn into these absolute catastrophes like we see in California over and over again. And it is right to point out that this is the consequence of ideology and incompetence mixed together in a deadly combination. Hi everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. Slightly different than usual. It's the first one of the year. I taped a full episode earlier in the week. I'm now taping this on Wednesday, January the 8th. And I was full of good cheer and energy about the year ahead, raring to go. And of course, since then, we've had the outbreak and the growth of these absolutely devastating fires in Los Angeles and Southern California. And so that has been going on today, obviously started yesterday through the night, and today it seems like it's getting worse. I wanted to have a conversation on that with a good friend of mine who has been very engaged and will be very engaged, particularly in the relief and recovery efforts once the immediate emergency is passed. And so we're going to put that at the top of the show. You'll hear that conversation first, and then we'll go into the show that was taped before the news of these terrible fires. So I just wanted to explain what you can expect from today's show. But we're going to start with this conversation with a friend of mine, Pastor Jack Hibbs. Jack, we were talking earlier today, we've been talking during the day about what's happening in Los Angeles and Southern California, this absolutely apocalyptic situation that's developing, and we see no end to it. Seems like it's worse than we even fear and gonna get worse.
Right.
Let's just start with your thoughts on what's been happening.
Well, first of all, living in Southern California, dry weather and winds are not uncommon. It's been happening here for thousands of years, okay? But Steve, I got to tell you, the overwhelming indicators, the smoke where there must be fire, so to speak, pun here, is telling. And here's what I'm saying, Steve, is that the people that are now being interviewed, people are fed up and angry and upset. Why are they upset? This natural disaster has happened, right? Of course they do. But what we're hearing, Steve, is that this fire may not have had to have happened. There's issues regarding infrastructure, lack of maintenance, lack of technology updates, and then the diversion of water. California has been in a battle with the Democrat Party for water. Our California growers want water. Our farmers, our dairymen want water. We have been absolutely, and I think, by the way, President Trump put an accurate comment out recently that the Democrat Party in California has starved the citizenry of the water that's provided in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so we've got to take a course, Steve, very quickly on how to fix this, because it's fixable if it's in the right hands of good leadership.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And, you know, I've been wrestling with this all day. I know you have as well, which is we got real humanitarian needs right now. We have people suffering, families suffering. We've had deaths. We've had people who've lost everything. And so you ask yourself, you know, should that be the only focus? And we'll get to that in a second, because I do want to end on a note of hope and what people can do to help, and particularly with the faith community. And that's how I want to end this conversation. But actually, during the day, as I've seen these scenes, I think it is right now to say it's not inevitable that these natural disasters turn into these absolute catastrophes like we see in California over and over again. And it is right to point out that this is the consequence of ideology and incompetence mixed together in a deadly combination. It's the water issue, exactly as you say. It's the forest management. I've seen people say, oh, well, Trump's talking about forest management. This isn't the forest. This isn't the Sierras. This is a city. Yeah, but it's the same principle. You have Chaparral here. You know it well where you're based in Southern California, there in Orange County. It's all around us there. And it's the same principle. You've got to maintain the habitat. You've got to clear brush. You've got to put fire breaks in. You've got to put fire. And none of that has happened for 30 years. And so it is right that we hold people accountable. It is right to be angry. And it is a moment for us all to say, we demand change so this doesn't happen again.
Well, Steve, you're exactly right. And for those of your viewers who are not familiar with California, even Southern California, you're talking about areas of devastation today and ongoing where the topography of California is awesome. We've got mountains 10,000 feet high cascading down through hills into the ocean. And those hills are either covered, as you said, with chaparral or various types of oaks. California has some of the greatest oaks, a beautiful terrain. And so much so that some of the areas, Steve, of Eaton Canyon, for example, Trump is again correct. That is maintained by the California Parks Department. That's a state agency, and a faction of it is also controlled by the National Park Service because it's so beautiful. They did not maintain. They have not maintained. Versus you and I, Steve, going to England, going to Germany, where a stick falls from a tree on the ground and the citizens pick it up and make a walking stick out of it. And the European forests don't burn like this, and they're beautiful. But the bottom line is, you hit the nail on the head, Steve. People are going to say, don't politicize this crisis. Wait a minute. It's bad politics that created the crisis.
Yes.
Now's the time to address it, lest we forget about it, especially in California, and we move on going to Disneyland. We can't let that happen. This has got to be owned by the people who have very bad ideas. And secondly, they've got to be voted out of office by the citizens of California. Our growers ought to be able to grow their almonds, and our cows ought to be able to be milked, and people ought to be able to turn on water. And I know that you've got a plan for that. We've talked about having plans for that. But real quick, I'll end with this, Steve, is you're talking about in Israel, a latitude and climate exactly the same as Southern California. The only fires that Israel has are set by terrorists. They have the winds, they have the temperatures. But you know what, Steve? They are water independent as a nation because they desalinate their water and they pull it from the Mediterranean. And Israel is the first nation on earth to be water independent. California can do it better. We are the epicenter of technology.
Yes.
Why not?
It's outrageous that we don't. Thank you for that. And you're right. We have a plan. People can check it out on my organization's website, Golden Together. It's goldentogether.com. Water abundance. We can have all the water we need in California. We just need proper common sense policies to make it happen and the political leadership to make it happen. Just a few points before we move on to the faith community and as I said, a more positive way to talk about what's happening and how we can all help. Is there's other things to point out. How did this fire start? They never tell us. Just a few weeks ago, there was a fire nearby in Malibu. Soledad Osua, who's on the board of Golden Together, she's very convinced, and she's been on this show to talk about it, that it was a homeless encampment that started that fire. Hundreds of fires a year started because of homeless encampments that are not cleared away by the authorities right across California. Look at the leadership, if you can call it that, in Los Angeles. Mayor Karen Bass cutting the fire department's budget, just arriving back from Africa, where she was on a trip for some pointless ceremony that she's going to the inauguration of the president of Ghana, but she's not going to the inauguration of our president here. And she's stopped at the airport and she literally freezes in silence when a reporter asks her for some kind of comment. I've never seen anything like it. It's a total catastrophic failure of competent leadership here in California. Additionally, the ideology, the far left ideology that prioritizes all this other nonsense instead of practical steps to keep us safe and make our lives better. But let's finish on as I said, the way that we can all get involved and help, because at this point, we do have a real and growing humanitarian crisis. Tell us a little bit about how you're getting involved, your organization, the faith community more broadly. What can we all do to help?
Yeah, first of all, let me announce that by what you're saying, and I appreciate and I thank you so much, Steve, you're opening the door as leadership should. And you're saying, where are the people of faith? If you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, if you're a Christian, practice your faith. And that's what we're encouraging people to do. And that's what we're doing right now. Two times today, I was talking with Franklin Graham of Samaritan's Purse. We've also talked with Glenn Beck and his organization yesterday and today. And so the first chance we get, we're going to be going in and establishing various levels of aid and assistance from actual equipment to rebuilding people's homes. So this is going to be a big process. This was great devastation. Again, I want everybody to understand it's still underway, so please pray. But this is the moment for the faith community to shine, to really put their mouth to their feet and get out there and do what Jesus said. Jesus said, love your neighbor. Well, this is an open door. And to be honest with you, Steve, this is a moment where atheists can join with the believers and say, let's help our fellow citizen here. We don't need to point fingers and get into some big dumb debate while someone's bleeding out. We got to unite, and we got to save California, and houses of faith and pastors and imams and rabbis, they should be leading the way right now. And that's what we're going to do.
I love it. I mean, this is exactly right. You know, we are one community in the end, and when our people are suffering, we got to help them. And at the same time, as we've been discussing, help means turning around the policies that have made a natural disaster. Disasters happen the whole time, but it's when places are badly run, they're much, much worse. And that's what we've got going on in California. Look, we're going to stay in touch. I know there'll be updates in the days and weeks ahead. This is going to be a long process of healing and rebuilding, but I know you're going to be at the heart of it, and I'll be there as well, right by your side. Jack, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you, Steve.
One of the immediate changes we've seen in 2025 already is the resignation of Justin Trudeau as Canada's Prime Minister. He hasn't gone yet, but he said that he's going in a couple of months. Of course, he's going because he's been a complete disaster for his country and for his party. He was about to be pushed out by his party, so he got ahead of that. He was going to be kicked out. They had no chance of winning the upcoming elections in Canada with Justin Trudeau at the helm. And so he kind of jumped before he was pushed. But the interesting thing about Trudeau is if you look at the whole experience of his, I don't even want to call it leadership, it's just a fascinating comparison with some of the stuff that we've had to put up with here in America, and in particular in California. Because what you've got from Trudeau is basically this, and it's classic sort of modern leftism, where you have this endless kind of spouting off about all these kind of high-minded things, you know, like climate change and environmental protection and social justice and equity and all these things they go on and on and on about. But what's the reality? The underlying reality is the exact opposite of everything that they lecture us about. So on every single measure, you know, Canadians have got poorer, worse off. There's a massive housing crisis. It's impossible for anyone to buy a home pretty much on a regular salary. The economy of Canada has basically decoupled from our economy here in America. There used to be a time when our economies rose hand in hand, and you look at the data now, while America's economy has been continuing to grow, Canada's is basically stagnating as a direct result of these terrible policies that have been pushed by Trudeau and his party in his years in power. The other thing I think that is so interesting about Trudeau was I just watched his announcement where he said he was resigning, and the overwhelming feeling I got from it, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show as well, is this incredible sense of inauthenticity, of fakery. You know, the kind of hammy, kind of actor type stuff that he comes out with, the sort of fake sincerity. It is just so nauseating. I mean, you know, I try not to be personal and focus on policies and so on, as you know, but there's just something so off-putting about it. And the reason I think it annoys people is because the results aren't there. And so it's fake in two ways. There's a sort of personal aspect to the fakery, but the whole thing is fake because they're saying they stand for all these great and beautiful things, but they deliver the exact opposite. And so I think it's a very salutary moment because it feels like that style of politics of these politicians just kind of getting away with all these kind of empty, vacuous phrases and slogans and BS, while their extremist policies, particularly on climate, I think it's a real characteristic of people who go on and on about climate change. And that's where I think the comparison is very, very close with Gavin Newsom here in California. And in fact, the two of them, you know, they're over the period that they've both been in office, you've seen them do events together where they kind of, you know, pat each other on the back about how they're both kind of climate champions and they're leading the world on climate. And they're doing this for their vanity and narcissism and pats on the back from activists and all the rest of it. But the actual consequences in the real world are a complete disaster. They make people poorer, these extremist climate policies that are such a hallmark of the Trudeau regime and the Newsom regime here in California. The climate extremism. And it's not just that they hurt people, particularly working class people. They don't even help the cause that they claim it will. They're not even making any progress on reducing emissions. In many cases, they actually increase emissions. I mean, we can get into that another time, but the point is this total lack of authenticity. It is totally fake. And people are seeing through it. And that's what happened to Justin Trudeau. And it started really with the resignation of one of his key colleagues in the government that undermined him. And that was all some scandal about lying or whatever. I can't even remember what it was about. But actually, in a way, the final nail in the coffin, and this isn't the most delicious irony in some senses, has to have been the complete humiliation of Justin Trudeau in Canada when he went to Mar-a-Lago to suck up to Donald Trump. And then Trump just comes out with all this stuff about Canada being the 51st state and calling him governor. And then, at first it was a little joke. Then Trump goes on and on about it. It was a humiliation for Canada. And they've had enough. And he could see the writing on the wall and he resigned. So he's going to be gone very soon. But of course, that whole style of politics, I think, is what needs to really be gone because people have had enough of it. We just want authentic, positive, practical ideas put into place that help people in their daily lives with the basics of a good life. That's what people want. That's the kind of thing that Trump talks about and why people voted for Trump here. And so I hope that the fall of Justin Trudeau really signifies a bigger shift, a bigger change in politics everywhere, where these politicians who think they can get away with all this BS realize that they can't. You've got to deliver, you've got to have practical results, and then people will support you. So I don't know if you saw Donald Trump's press conference. It was the first public event that he did after being finally confirmed as president, the official count in Congress, the results certified by Vice President Kamala Harris. And then he was out the next day with the press conference at Mar-a-Lago, which, I've already seen a lot of the press have been dismissing as rambling and crazy and bizarre, whatever, all these words that they like to use about Trump. But actually, to me, it was incredibly interesting. It was a long press conference. I was on air with Fox talking about it beforehand. We watched it together. And the thing that was really revealing to me about it and just noticeable about it was the fact that you've got someone who's about to be the president who just understands policy, who knows what he's talking about. And he has very specific points of view on different issues. And they're clear and you can understand what he's saying. And it's a change. And the real big change, of course, is that if my overall reaction to it is like, it's going to be great to have a president again, to actually have a president who's in charge, who's leading in a particular direction. You may not like the direction. Of course, lots of people didn't vote for Donald Trump, but there's no doubt about where he wants to take the country. And the substance was so clear. And this is the big contrast with what I was just talking about with Justin Trudeau. There's no fancy, flowery language or one thing after another from Trump, practical things. He starts with the announcement of a new investment into America, someone who's worked with before, who's going to build data centers, billions and billions of dollars of investment. And the thing is, you could say, well, that's, I think it was $20 billion, the scale of this investment. You could say, well, in a multi-trillion-dollar economy, so what? What's the big deal there? The big deal is that these kinds of things, these very tangible, practical things, not empty speeches and waffle about this or that, but like, here's a guy who's putting money into America. That sends an incredible signal to the whole world, actually, that America is open for business. And you've got an administration there and a president there who celebrates business instead of denigrating it the whole time, who wants investment, who will help investors come to America. And I thought one of the most interesting things Trump said, again, really tangible and practical and positive, not ideological, like we get from people like Trudeau and Newsom and all these leftists, just practical, common sense things, where he said, if you come, this is what he said at the press conference, if you come into America with any kind of investment over $1 billion, we will expedite the process. We will make it simple. We'll clear away all the kind of regulatory stuff that gets in the way, that slows things down, whether that's environmental permits or whatever it may be. That's exactly the attitude we need, because America's got completely kind of snarled up in that kind of ridiculous bureaucracy and red tape, and it stops things from happening. And so it's such a refreshing contrast to have someone there who talks like this, who talks like Trump does, and the media can dismiss it. I think the reason that they talk about it as being bizarre or rambling, whatever, is because it's sort of matter of fact, plain English. It's not the highfalutin speeches that you get from these people like Trudeau and Newsom, all this rhetoric. But I think the people are ahead of the media in this sense. So the media think that that's how politicians are supposed to behave. They can give all these flowery speeches, but people are sick of that, and they're not interested in that. They just want results. And so when they see Trump speaking in that practical way about policy that he clearly understands, I mean, he's going on, as he often has in the past, about the ridiculousness of trying to electrify everything, and Biden's policies that will try and take out everyone's gas heating appliances in their homes and replace them with electric. And then Trump's going on about it's less efficient. It doesn't heat the air and you get itchy, whatever. All these things, they're practical things. And it's a real refreshing change, I think, to have a president who really understands the detail of policy like that. Because that's how change happens. It's not about these flowery speeches, it's about specific policies. And Trump gets that. And I just thought it was a fantastically encouraging sign of things to come. We've got so used to all these politicians. Biden, I can barely read out the speeches that are written for him, but it's all just so vague and up in the air and so on. And here you have Trump, just one thing after another, really specific, really tangible. And it's all about doing things that boost the economy, that raise living standards, that make life easier for people. And also the other aspect of the press conference I thought that was great was that when he's asked questions, for example, about the return of the hostages, he's just very direct about that. And for example, he was asked to explain his threat about, about how, all hell will break loose if the hostages aren't returned by the time he's inaugurated. What do you exactly mean by that? Trump is very direct and honest about this. He said, I don't want to tell you. I'm just going to leave it at that. And it's a great example of how transparent he is. And again, you can dismiss that, and the media do try and dismiss that as unpresidential or whatever. But the point is, Trump is just being incredibly transparent, and he'll tell you. And I've heard him say it many times. I'm sorry, it's not right to answer that question because it will mess up a negotiation or whatever. He's just being very direct. He doesn't give you the BS politician answer. And I just think it's so encouraging that we're going to get back to that, and we have a real president again, and start this year, I think, with great optimism and hope that things are going to get better. And one last thing I will say about the press conference, is classic Trump. And it's one of those things where you think, yeah, why not? Why hasn't anyone done this before? He announced that he wanted to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And you think, yeah, great. Why not? That's such a great thing to say. And again, outrage from many quarters, and can he do this or whatever? Look, it's just, this is what people want. It's just clear stuff that is, coming from a guy who so obviously loves this country, proud of America, wants to make America strong and successful with positive, practical policies and a business-like approach that gets things done. Okay, our first episode of California Corner for this new year of 2025. Of course, it is a great joy and delight to usher in the new year with our friend Jen Horn, AM 870, The Morning Answer, Los Angeles, and the whole of California. I meet people all over the state who listen to you and Grant, in the morning. It's always a great show, and I'm so happy that you're here to bring in the new year. It's going to be a great year. How are you feeling?
I am feeling great. It's kind of like the first official day of the year, even though we're a few days in, but this is when things get serious. It's really good to see you. I've missed you the last couple of weeks actually on the program because you've been on holiday break, and Grant was telling me today, he goes, where is Steve? Where is Steve Hilton? And I said, he's been on vacation, but he'll be back. We're all back in action now.
Yes. No, I took a real break, actually. I was talking about that elsewhere in the show as well. A real break, which was good because this is going to be a very, very busy year. I put out a video last night on my social media. Which we were recording this, by the way, for everyone who are listening at different times. It's Monday, January the 6th, Sunday night, just after we got back. I put out a video on my social media saying this is the year the fight begins to save California. So I'm very excited about that. Lots coming up this year. All right.
We're ready to go.
On? Yeah, exactly. I'm really ready. I really am, actually. I'm very fired up. So come on then. What's happening in California? What's the latest?
All right, should we go with crazy first? I mean, because we're going to talk
Yes.
about Gavin Newsom, which is always crazy, but maybe unexpectedly crazy. So we heard about the New Year's Eve day attack in New Orleans. We heard about the Cybertruck blowing up in Las Vegas. But did you hear on New Year's Eve that the sheriff's department in LA went down off the grid? They were no longer
Wow.
able to use their computers, which deliver calls to the police officers' cruisers, to the sheriff's cruisers, with the information on crimes that are happening in an effort for them to try to stop them or to investigate, completely offline. Crickets from the mainstream news media, from the local news media, not covering this. A few like smidge of stories in the LA Times here, but really not delving into how the second biggest city in America can have their sheriff's department without computers going into their vehicles. And so I dug around a little bit and talked to our friend, the former LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. And he said that this was not, because at first you're thinking all sorts of things. Is this a cyber attack? Is
Cyber
there,
attack. Yeah.
yeah, something nefarious going on? Well, it turns out that the sheriff's department have been using such an antiquated system. It has
No.
not been updated in 20 years. And apparently it was scheduled for an update before Villanueva came in, but then he got into his, a little bit of a match, basically a war of words with the LA County Board of Supervisors. So they shut him down. So he was not able to upgrade the system because he needed their approval. And then lo and behold, when he loses to Sheriff Luna, he writes a letter, which he presented to me saying, guys, we need to update this system. It is not going to work any longer. This system is going to be gone. And apparently Sheriff Luna just let that lay by the wayside and no
Amazing.
one did anything about it until New Year's Eve when the system goes down. Now, there was going to be no patch for this system because it's so old, but apparently they were able to find a couple of easy repairs or some new things that they're testing out right now. So as you and I talk, not all of the LA County Sheriff's Department is back online, but pieces of it are as they are working on this fix. But yet, not a word or not a bit of talk about accountability about the Board of Supervisors and the Sheriff's Department letting this go. Not only does that slow down response times when people are calling 911 and dispatch, but it's also putting the police officers, the sheriff's
Yes.
officers' lives in
At
danger
risk.
because
Yeah.
they have to stop and actually physically, when they're using the radio, have to stop the vehicle and handwrite the notes, the address, the information, suspect details. They actually have to write that down in a notebook like the old fashioned way. So it really does impact the people living in Los Angeles County who have sheriff's department in their area, and it's impacting the safety of the officers. And nobody seems to be really blinking about this one. It's really been kind of a covered up story.
Amazing story. Wow. I mean, I hadn't heard it. That's incredibly
Yeah.
helpful to have you lay it out there. And it reflects I mean, it's just another example of the catastrophic mismanagement of our state by these Democrats who brag about being a model for the nation and we're the fifth biggest economy and all this kind of stuff. And it's just completely disastrous on every front. It's a failure on every front. Fun enough, I mean, it reminds me, of course, of the other big disaster, which was in the same category, which we saw during the pandemic, the EDD, the
Yes.
Employment Development Department, where, was how many billions? 30 billion? I can't remember the exact number, 24, 25, whatever, like tens of billions of dollars lost of our money lost because of their ridiculous, antiquated technology. And
Yeah.
again, they didn't even try and pretend it wasn't that. Julie Su, who's now the acting, for a few more days in the Biden administration, the federal labor secretary was in charge there in California, and she said, "Yeah, sorry, we just have really old systems, doesn't work anymore." Like, well, okay, why don't you fix it? It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
It's called planning for the future. And what's really frightening
In the
is
tech
that the
capital
board,
of the world, by the way, the
I
tech
know.
capital of the world, and we
And
can't run basic systems.
I always hear your voice in my head because you say something that is so true. And that is that California is at the top of every list you don't want to be on and the bottom of every list that you do want to be on. And you think about the fifth largest economy on the planet. And in many ways, we operate for our citizens like a third world country. The fact that policing is going to take even longer in Los Angeles when we're already struggling with crime, and that you're going to put police in the line of danger because you forgot to upgrade your system when you've been warned about it. It doesn't make any sense. And it also kind of brings up another issue as well as we think ahead about how we can make things better in California. And I think one of the things, and this is bipartisan, that we can all be on the same page with is simplifying ballot measures, initiatives, and amendments. Because clearly, I think, unfortunately, people don't have a lot of time to read measures, local or otherwise, and they vote on things based on either what a mailer tells them to do or maybe a commercial they see on TV. And what's appalling to me is that the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, empowered the board of supervisors to have the ability to fire the sheriff. We gave that power to the board of supervisors, who's literally using our safety as a pawn in their game of politics with the sitting sheriff when that's an elected position. The power of whether or not the sheriff has a job should be in the hands of the people. It shouldn't be given a second go round in the hands of the board of supervisors. And I truly believe, Steve, that people voted for that one because they didn't understand it.
I mean, the whole thing is a joke, and it just does remind me of something. I'll give you a little sneak preview, by the way, of something coming up in not too distant future, which is my new book, which is called Caliphalia: Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. And the reason this comes to mind right now is that the way, and people will see when you get the book, pre-order now, as they say on Amazon, Caliphalia. But the book's in two parts. The first is like what's gone wrong, that's Caliphalia, and the second part is how we can put it right. That's called Califuture. But in the list of what's gone wrong, and that's first, the critique. I didn't just want to go through issue by issue because it's a little bit boring, crime and schools and whatever. I tried to kind of really get into an understanding of the what are the components of this far left ideology that's driven us to the brink of disaster and in many cases actual disaster. And it's all these things like, each chapter's like that. So it's elitism and narcissism and all this cronyism. But funnily enough, I was just thinking about it and think there are some things which are not ideological that have gone wrong. If we're being honest, it's just pure incompetence. Like it's just absolute idiocy, incompetence. They don't know how to run things. They're a joke. It's a clown show. And so I kind of made up, I'm so happy with all my chapter headings that all end in ism, the pathologies of this, they're all sort of one ism or another. I thought, well, I've got to be honest, some of it's just incompetence. So I made up a word. And what I argued was that these Democrats have elevated incompetence to such a level that it's beyond mere ineptitude and it's actually pathological. So we're going to give it a name, incompetism.
I love it. That's what we have in LA.
Exactly, incompetism. It's like a pathological inability to do things right. Anyway, that was another great example, and awful, but I mean, there's no end of them.
Yeah.
What's the other story? You talk about Newsom.
All right. So Newsom has been making a lot of news, and the latest, he's been an absolute disaster. Well, on many things, but when it comes to his state of the state, remember, he hasn't given like a real state of the state since I think 2019. And then this year he didn't want to give a state of the state because the budget was wrong and he couldn't get a balanced budget. And that's required under California law. Anyway, he has been doing state of the state all wrong since 2019. Well, guess what? It's usually supposed to be delivered in February or March, but Gavin Newsom this time, apparently he is ready to go bright and early. He wants to deliver his state of the state before January 20th. Of course, he would have loved to give that speech right before President Trump takes office, but Jimmy Carter to the rescue. Apparently he'll delay it because he wants to go to the funeral of Jimmy Carter. Better to be seen on the national stage, I guess, than in a big speech for the state of the state. He also, over the last several weeks, has done a couple of things. One of them, made fun of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy for Doge because he said California has been at the forefront of trying to deal with government inefficiency, as I roll my eyes. He also just came out and said that he wants to start dealing with unhealthy food. Sound familiar? RFK Jr., anyone in California? So he's been doing that. And really the cherry on top of all of the Gavin Newsom Sunday is the latest. And that is he has come out and he started crowing about how he's starting to fix retail crime and that all of this smash and grab stuff, like the numbers are starting to drop down. And so he's out there saying it was his policies that created less smash and grab. When we know, Steve, that up until November 5th, Gavin Newsom was fighting as hard as he could to fight against Proposition 36, which tries to repair Proposition 47, which really focused heavily on stopping smash and grab. And Gavin Newsom was dead set against it. But now somehow he's talking about his policies that have now created a difference in the numbers of smash and grab crimes in California. It's amazing. Never stops.
It's a sort of shamelessness about it. That's what's so funny, isn't it? Like there's no shame. It's like totally obvious that this is all complete BS and that they say it anyway. It's like when it reminds me of when it was what was the thing? The Prop 1, wasn't it, in March last year, that the latest sort of BS attempt to kind of deal with homelessness that he first
That's
promised
right.
he would deal with like over 20 years ago would be done. Anyway, at one point he literally stood up at a press conference and said California's approach to homelessness is a model for the nation. And you just think, what? Like, who does he think? Like,
Yeah, to
I mean,
create homelessness.
yeah, exactly. A model for how to do. It's just incredible that they can say these things, but there's no
Yeah.
shame there. So they can. It's in a way, it's kind of impressive, just on a sheer kind of performance level that you can do this.
I guess on a performance stage, yes, it is impressive that a guy can spew so much stuff. But I just have to ask, because we know he wants to get out of California. Someone else is going to be governor in 2 years. So he's on his way out. And so you have to think, does the rest of the country, in the situation it's in right now, having just voted for President Trump with a pretty big mandate, all the swing states went for him, is it ready for Gavin Newsom? And I really think the answer is less about Gavin Newsom and more about President Trump. If Republicans in California and if President Trump across the country can actually deliver in the next 2 years, it's a really consequential period. I think no matter what Gavin Newsom tries to shovel at the American people, people are not going to believe him because they see that the proof is in the pudding, right? If we can make real changes as a Republican Party, or if Prop 36 really works, we're going to be able to show Gavin Newsom for the hypocrite he is. But if we let our foot off of the accelerator for 1 second and just relax and go, okay, President Trump's in office and we don't have to work anymore, then that's how Gavin Newsom wins again. His lies could catch fire with the American people if they don't like what we can produce for them in the next 2 years. So
I think that's a really important point. Yeah.
I think it's a consequential time for our party in the state of California and across the country. We cannot let up. We've got some momentum, some wind at our back, and we have to perform.
It's a huge point. And let's just focus on the California aspect and connect it to the national political scene. And you're totally right, because what we need going into 2026 and the election there, in terms of the fight to save California and turf out this Democrat disaster. I've been thinking about it over the holidays, actually. I took a break from social media and all of that, but I've been thinking a lot about all this. I was putting the finishing touches, final copy edits to the book and all this kind of stuff. So very much in my mind. And actually, when you really think about California, it isn't just the politicians, because because they've had it all their own way for so long. This Califalia, as I call it, this is what you get when the Democrats get everything they want. They've had it all their own way. It's not just the politicians. It's the activists, the far left activists that push them towards these ideological extremes. It's the bureaucrats, all these state agencies, they're all appointed by Democrats. So if you look at the swap, what Doge is focused on at the federal level, at least in DC, you've had Republican administrations back and forth. So it's not completely dominated by Democrat left-wing appointees. Here it is, because it's just been, so you've got the politicians, you've got the activists, you've got the bureaucrats, and then you've got the unions in California. They're so dominant, but in particular, the government unions. You put all that together, it's what I call, California's Democrat industrial complex. That's actually what it is. You've got to beat all of it, actually. It's going to be hard work. And so what we need is a very simple, model where people can look at the national thing and say, oh, you vote Republican and good things happen. I get it.
Yep.
Let's have that here in California. Now, in a small way, we have it here in California. And that's why I talk about it a lot. Huntington Beach in Orange County.
That's right.
A really great example, because 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago, that was a council. You could say it's not a huge city, but it's sort of a mid-sized city, an important city, cultural import, Surf City, USA, biggest city in Orange County, I believe. They had a 6-1 Democrat majority on the city council. Then 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago in 2022, friend of mine, Tony Strickland, great guy, very experienced politician in California, put together, he's been on the show many times, put together this slate of candidates that took control just in Huntington Beach. They went from 6-1 Democrat to 4-3 Republican. And then immediately they started doing common sense Republican things, clearing the streets of homeless people, enforcing the law on, all crime, including what is described as minor crime, all these things, fighting back against the housing authoritarianism coming from Sacramento, all these practical things. And then introducing voter ID via ballot initiative.
Right.
And just now in 2024, they had a clean sweep, 7-0 Republicans. It's gone from 6-1 Democrat to 7-0 Republican in the space of 4 years because they delivered. And
Yep.
and people could see, oh, I vote Republican, good things happen. That's what we need at the national level.
Absolutely. And I think we need to be really good about telling stories. The story of Huntington Beach shows how much that city has cleaned itself up with Republicans in charge. And I think there's signs of hope right now. We've had President Trump help us close margins in counties and flip counties that had been blue before. And I think it's now up to us where we need to start saying, look, enough is enough. You've tried this way for 20 years. How is it working for you? Let someone else have a chance that's going to come in there and try something different, maybe a different approach, maybe a simpler approach, maybe more transparency. And I think there is going to be an appetite for that. I think
Yes.
people are ready, and I think there is a distrust of the big government machine. So the everyday people, the people who come from different walks of life, who are not career politicians, I do think have the wind at their back right now because people are distrustful of that big government system. They want people who are coming in to help for the right reasons. And I have faith that the people of California are going to see that. And it's going to be a slow path, but maybe quicker than many of us thought. Maybe it's not going
Yeah.
to be as slow as we think.
Well, I completely agree. Just a couple of
Yeah.
things I want to say in conclusion there, and I'll give you the last word in a second, Jen. Like, one thing is, I think that to your point about the non-politicians, just a couple of things I've seen and read in the last couple of days reminded me of this. So there was a brilliant piece by our friend Kira Davis, again, who's been a guest here. She's fantastic. Wrote a brilliant piece on her blog, I think, or Substack. I don't remember exactly where you can find it. Look it up, about the new Meghan Markle show on Netflix, which all they put out is this trailer. It's called With Love from Meghan or something. And it was brilliant. Kira wrote a brilliant piece of it on it, which was that the overwhelming thing you get from it is just fakery. It's all fake, right? And she connected it to the Kamala Harris campaign and the fakeness and the Oprah thing and Beyonce not performing, but they wanted people to think that she would perform, and the whole kind of fakeness around the Kamala Harris. And then people are sick of it. They just hate this fake bullshit. It feels so outdated.
Yeah.
And that's why they love Trump. And I think that's a really important point here as well. Oh, and the other thing connected to that, I just watched just before we started taping Justin Trudeau's announcement that he's stepping down, and
Oh, it's rough.
it was so like I normally try and avoid like just pure gratuitous personal insults, but I just couldn't help myself. I said, "What a ghastly creep!" I mean, just the whole kind of, like I said, he's oozing fakeness from every pore. It's just so unbearable.
I think that's what you're right about, though. I think it is
Just
the fake
fake.
people.
Ugh.
People can see through now. We're
Yeah,
sick
you
of it.
can't get
You
away
want
with it.
real. Yep.
Exactly. And then the final point, just to give people a bit of hope for the new year, for 2026. We may have discussed this number with you before, but you just do a little bit of math and project it forward to 2026. This is, these are assumptions, but still, it shows you. When people say, "Oh, Republicans can't win in California," well, think about it this way: in 2026, it's a midterm election, in terms of the national thing, and those always lower turnout. And if you take the average of the past 2 or 3 midterm elections in California, and you say, well, how many votes do you need to win? And based on a small, 51% victory. So if you do the average, the actual total number of votes in 2026, based on past performance, is going to be 11.7 million. So just a very simple, basic piece of math to say, well, what is 50? Well, just over half of that, 5.9 million votes. That's what you need to win, based on this reasonable assumption of what the turnout will be. Trump just got, was it 6.1 million in California? Steve Garvey got 6.3 million. I think those are the right numbers. In other words, the votes are there. We just had more than enough people vote Republican in California than we will need in 2026. We just got to get them out to vote in a midterm election. So this idea that it's not possible is simply not true. The votes are there. There are enough Republicans in California. We just saw it happen in 2024. So we can do this. We just need to, make it happen.
Yeah, I'll add on. In a midterm year, the people that are going to turn out to vote are the people who want change. And the people who want change are done with the 25 Democrats that are going to be running on that side of the aisle. They're going to want somebody who is going to be a little different, who says things a little differently. And so I really believe that there is an opportunity here for the right candidate to make some real waves in California. We just have to all come together. We have to all vote. Everybody needs to be part of the process, and we need to continue to broaden our tent. And sadly, I think the Democrats are helping broaden it for us, maybe happily, because of all the failures that people are actually awake to, and they're actually paying attention to, and they're tired of it. I think change is going to be the key word in the next couple of years, and I believe that machine's got to watch out.
100%. Very exciting. All right, Jen,
I
great to
know.
see you. Happy
You
New
too.
Year.
Happy New Year.
All right, see you soon.
Thanks.
All right, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Someone we haven't had before on the show. Welcome, Dr. Naydeen Gonzalez-De Jesus. You are a senior executive at a community college in Texas. And you've just had such a fascinating take on what's going on. It's something we talk about here in respect of California, particularly with the changes politically and the Latino vote. We just saw that very much in the elections just gone. But you've got a really interesting take on that. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you think about what's going on in our politics right now.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here with you. I would have to say, first, it's important to note that whatever I'm going to say, it's not an all-inclusive of the Hispanic voice, right? I come from an independent point of view, right at the center or so. And then also, I want to say that someone that came from Puerto Rico at the age of 14, I think it's important to know that although Puerto Rico is a commonwealth of the U.S., we also face a lot of the issues that some immigrants from other parts of the world may have to face, such as, for example, we have to learn English from the ground up. We have to understand that there are other norms in terms of the lifestyle and ways in which we must interact with one another. So I wanted to point that out right there and then. Also, it's important to note that as a Puerto Rican, I support the administration that is coming in into DC this coming year. Why is that? I would have to say that it is first and foremost because under the Trump administration, what I believe we are going to receive is the idea that the United States would come first, right? The United States would come first. And I believe that that is the reason why a lot of Hispanics may have voted for the Trump administration once again. The idea that America will not just be first, but we will begin to be respected across the world. Right now, for example, I have a lot of friends that I've either worked with or I am associated with, and many of them are from across the border, right? And having said that, they too feel when I speak with them outside our offices, of course. One of the things that they have told me is, I waited a long time to get here. I waited a long time to enter the United States of
Yes.
America, right? So if they waited so long, how come we're opening the borders and allowing everyone else to come through without having to go through the processes that we already have in place? So that's first and foremost. We have our systems, we have our processes in place, and now you might tell me, but how about those that are, for example, here seeking asylum? Well, there is a process for asylum, right? You come through the port of entry. And by coming through the port of entry, you then apply for asylum, right? There is a process, and skipping the process, it is a disadvantage for those of us who are already here, for the citizens and the residents of the United States who are doing it the legal way, the right way. And it's also a disadvantage for individuals who have been here for a long time. They are born, they're born citizens of the United States. We all pay our taxes, right? So by paying our taxes, by looking out for our economy, our education, our systems. We are the ones affording the US economy and allowing for the economy to continue to run the way it has. So that's one of the issues as to why I believe a lot of Hispanics may have voted for the Trump administration.
So can I ask you just a question on that? So you've made a very strong case there for the fairness argument, which I totally get. And there's another layer that is used in the current conversation to account for this really remarkable shift in voting patterns. It's really since Trump has been the leader of the Republican Party going right back to 2016. Another argument is made is that, again, forgive me, like in California, typically people say Latino. You say in Texas Hispanic. I've noticed that people say that it's a different terminology. So that's what we're used to saying here. But regardless of the term used, that community is very much, is pretty. You hear this all the time. Well, they're pretty conservative, right? Pretty conservative in their attitudes, both in terms of family and faith, and also on economic questions. And that's part of the story as well. So my question is, if all of that is true, why were Hispanics, Latinos, whatever term you want to use, ever such big supporters of the Democratic Party?
That's an excellent question, Steve. To be honest with you, I do not know. I would have to say for the Democrats out there that are planning to run after these 4 years are over, they're going to have to think very clearly about what it is that they stand for. You cannot go all the way to the left and forget about the familia, our values. Our conservative values are so important to many of us, Latinos, Hispanics, Latinx, however you want to call it.
Not
Many of
that,
us,
by the way. I think the one thing we can say is it's not that word.
not okay, thank you so much. Yes. Okay, so as Hispanics, I'll be honest with you, many of us are about the familia. It's important for us to have the unity of the family, our household, right? And one thing that I want to point out is anytime you run a campaign that is based on artists in Hollywood and just these big names, right? It has nothing to do with our households. It has nothing to do with how are you going to help us put food on our table? How are you relating to us as Latinos to help us understand that you're not just about the voice of the extreme left, but that you are able to listen to us and to have a conversation with us, to truly connect with us. And by the way, I don't mean it by adopting an accent that might make you sound Hispanic, as we saw, right? Or adopting an accent that might make you sound as if you are from, I don't know, you name it. You need to come across authentic. And I think that that is one of the issues that it turned off a lot of people, not just Hispanics, but overall, the lack of authenticity across the board throughout the campaign. And also the inability for the vice president to detach herself from the Biden administration. For
Well, that was
example,
ridiculous.
when she
Exactly.
was asked, for example, is there anything that you would do differently? She didn't specifically say anything, right? Different. She said, I wouldn't change a thing. I think, I was there, we made the decisions, and I wouldn't change a thing. That to me would have been an excellent point or an excellent way for her to diplomatically respect her boss and say, in hindsight, now that we know what we know, what I would do differently is XYZ, right? And again, spell those things out. But to this day, I still don't know what the policies of that
Well, she has
individual
no
were.
idea. She has no
Well,
idea.
well, wait a
Can I-
second. I do know though one policy, and that is the extreme left of identity politics. It's got to stop. It's got to stop.
Totally. Well, that's what
We
they're all
don't
about.
vote. Absolutely. We don't vote because you are either black, white, Hispanic. We're voting based on the policies.
And that's what I think is so important. Of course, when you talk about elections and these demographic groups, you talk about these categories, but in the end, I think what's attractive about the Republican way of seeing the world, certainly how I see the world, is that actually in the end, yes, we can talk about it in this way or that way, but in the end, we believe we're all Americans and we have the same approach, which is we want the opportunities that come with that. I'm an immigrant. I feel the same way. It took me a long time. It was annoying. I hate bureaucracy, so you just got to do it the right way. Last question for you. I want to throw it forward. And of course, we don't know exactly how it's going to go down, but I want to put to you the extreme version of the fears that have been, the fear mongering, I should say, that's really going on about what's going to be coming from the incoming Trump administration, and Tom Homan, who's going to be in charge over all of the border policy and enforcing that. Mass deportations, right? That's the term that's been used by both sides. No one's disputing that term. What do you think that will? I mean, just talk about that in terms of what you would like to see. What do you think? I mean, I suppose here's the question: do you think one of the points that was made in the election was usually by rich white people, and leftist commentators, like how are all these Latinos supporting mass deportation? You see it in the polling. Do you think that will continue to be the case when it's reality rather than just a promise?
I think what I would like to see, and again, it's not just me, but a lot of my colleagues and friends and folks that I've spoken with, we would like to see anyone who came under the DACA umbrella to continue to still be here, right? But they've been here since the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, these were kids when they arrived, right? Now they have households, they own homes, they're paying their taxes, they have jobs, they're going to college, they are part of the economy of the USA, right? They came here not because of their own choice, but because their parents brought them here. So I think that when we talk about immigration, we need to address that.
What you've laid out there is very much in line with what I've heard Tom Homan say about how they're going to approach it. So we'll see. It's great to have you with us. I hope we can talk again soon. I really, really appreciate your perspective. See you soon.
Thank you, Steve.
So here's something that happened while I was away that really, really I found so utterly offensive. I know many of you did too, but I have a particularly personal take on it, as you'll see in a second, which is the award that Biden made to George Soros of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I mean, this was completely obscene. Many people have made that point, but I feel it particularly strongly because, of course, like George Soros, I'm Hungarian. Like George Soros, I'm also now an American. But unlike George Soros, I think that when I'm here as an American, as an immigrant, my job, my duty is to love this country, to support this country, to do everything I can to make this country great and to improve the lives of people here, whether in a small way or in bigger ways. That's the role that you should play as someone who's had the enormous privilege of being an American, who's born somewhere else, but is part of the American family now. And I think George Soros has done the exact opposite. It is completely obscene to give him an award. I mean, the litany of things. I mean, if you just look at what he's done. I mean, first of all, he's built this enormous fortune, which is much of it obtained by doing things that have ripped off Americans. So, and what's he done with his ill-gotten gains, George Soros? He's used these ill-gotten gains, the great gifts and advantages that America bestowed on him, to undermine the basic fabric of our society with his far-left ideological extremism that has hurt so many people. And of course, we feel it in California particularly, because the assault on law and order and public safety that he has funded, he kind of initiated the whole thing. He was right there at the beginning with what they call the progressive prosecutors movement that has brought complete, crime and chaos to the great cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and Oakland, descending into, dystopian scenes of squalor and decay. And people have been hurt by this. They've been injured. They've lost loved ones. the crime, the murder, the mayhem funded by George Soros. And all through that time, we've had not a word of remorse or reflection or apology or anything. And he continues to fund it. It is an absolute disgrace. And for that, he's honored at the White House. He should be shamed and humiliated for what he's done to this country. And so I will finally end with something, as they say, in a language that George Soros will particularly understand, in Hungarian. I don't think you should be getting the Medal of Freedom, George Soros. I'm going to say something that you will understand very well. Menja picsába. You can look it up. All right, that's our show for today. Remember that my new book, Caliphalia, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State, is out soon. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. I think you'll enjoy it when it comes out. And we're back with Big Ideas Book Club. We took a little bit of a break over the election season, but we're back now with that other podcast. And I think you'll really enjoy the conversation in the first one of the new year with a guy called Oren Cass, who runs American Compass, which is a think tank that's really trying to advance the ideas around the populism that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance represent, and trying to put some policy around that. We had a really good conversation about an issue that bubbled up over the holidays. Again, I wasn't really here to weigh in, but the whole debate around immigration, H-1B visas, American workers, all of that. We get into it in a very, very good, thoughtful conversation with Oren Cass. So do please check out Big Ideas Book Club, and we'll see you back here next week for the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show.